June 26, 1284. By nightfall, 130 children had vanished from Hamelin, leaving behind only silence and a single, chilling entry in the town's record. What began as a fairy tale was actually a real, unsolved mass disappearance. The evidence is buried in forgotten windows, faded manuscripts, and a street where music remains forbidden. But whose memory does this story really protect, and what dark reality are we about to uncover? In the late 13th century, Hamelin pressed against its own boundaries. Timbered houses leaned over muddy lanes, and the air was thick with the noise of too many lives. The town felt overcrowded, with too little space for too many people. Land was scarce, and families struggled to secure plots for their children. Across the Holy Roman Empire, towns like Hamelin faced the same dilemma: swelling populations, not enough fields, and a future that narrowed with each passing year. Yet beyond the forests and rivers to the east, lords and bishops sought hands to clear new land. This was the era of the Ostsiedlung, a movement that drew young people away from familiar streets and into unknown territory. Recruiters, called locators, traveled from town to town, offering promises that seemed almost impossible: years free from taxes, heritable land, and the chance to start anew. For many, these offers meant hope. For recruiters, visibility was everything. Some wore striking, multicolored clothing, marking themselves as outsiders with opportunity. Their arrival was an event, a signal that doors could open for those willing to leave everything behind. Records from this period show that these agents organized entire groups, not just individuals. The term "children in town" accounts often meant unmarried youths, young adults ready for hard labor, and new beginnings. A recruiter in a bright coat could gather a following simply by walking through the market square, his presence a living advertisement for a different life. In Hamelin, as in so many towns, the pressure to depart was real, and the lure of freedom, land, and privilege was powerful enough to draw a generation toward the horizon. Around the year 1300, a stained glass window was installed in the parish church of Hamelin. The glass did not survive the centuries. It was destroyed during church renovations in the 1600s, leaving behind no fragments, only written descriptions. Those descriptions, recorded by local chroniclers and later antiquarians, agree on what the window showed. A single figure, dressed in a coat of many colors, led a procession of children out of the town. The image was not a fairy tale, but a memorial, commissioned within living memory of the event itself. In the heart of the church, where townspeople gathered for worship, the loss was made sacred. The figure's multicolored garment echoed the language of the earliest written accounts, binding the image to the story that haunted Hamelin. The children, sometimes described as pale or ghost-like, trailed behind the leader, their number left uncounted in glass, but fixed in the verses recited by the townspeople: 130, born in Hamelin, gone on a single June day. This verse became a refrain the town could not forget. No record names the patron who paid for this window, or the artist who shaped its design. Yet the decision to place such a scene in the church's light reveals how deeply the disappearance cut. The community did not hide from its grief. It set the memory in colored glass, where every parishioner would see it. Even after the window was lost, its story survived in the words of those who saw it, and in the quiet that settled over the town each time the sun passed through the church's remaining panes. On a piece of parchment, in a careful 15th century hand, the details are set down with the weight of a legal record. The entry is brief, but it does not hesitate. It records that on June 26, 1284, 130 children born in Hamelin were led out of the town by a piper clothed in many colors to Calvary near the Koppen, and lost. The number 130 is exact. The date June 26th aligns with the feast of Saints John and Paul. The location near the Koppen, a knoll or hill just outside Hamelin, anchors the event in the landscape. The wording is precise. The children were led out and lost. The mention of Calvary, a place of execution, adds a note of finality. There is no mention of rats, no hint of revenge, only the silent record of an absence. This manuscript, written more than a century after the event, but echoing older town traditions and memorial verses, stands as the earliest surviving written account. Its spare phrasing has outlasted the glass and stone of Hamelin, fixing the story in the annals of the town and in the quiet dread that still lingers over the hills called Koppen. Bungelosenstrasse winds quietly through the old heart of Hamelin, its stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The name means street without drums, a phrase that carries a weight the town still feels. Here, music is forbidden, not by law on paper, but by a tradition older than any ordinance, a silence that honors what was lost. Local stories say this was the path the children took when they vanished. No parades, no celebrations, no wedding processions with fiddles or pipes are allowed to break the hush. Even during festivals, when the rest of Hamelin fills with music, this street remains untouched by song. Residents speak of the silence with a kind of respect, as if it is a boundary no one wants to cross. The custom is not written down in any surviving medieval code, but it persists, passed from one generation to the next. In a city shaped by memory, Bungelosenstrasse is a living trace, an everyday reminder that some wounds are never entirely closed and some stories echo longest in the places where nothing is heard. Charters from the late 13th century show how rulers and church lords competed to draw young settlers eastward, offering privileges that towns like Hamelin could never match. A locator, part entrepreneur and part organizer, might promise entire years free from taxes, a guaranteed plot of land, and the right to shape a new community under imported German law. These contracts, preserved in town archives from Brandenburg to Transylvania, detail how whole groups of unmarried youths, often described in records as children, were recruited for the journey. The locator's job was to gather enough able hands to clear forests, build villages, and anchor the frontier. For the young, the rewards were heritable land, legal freedoms, and an escape from the crowding and limits of their birthplace. Yet for Hamelin, no surviving charter names a specific group or records the destination of those who vanished in 1284. The silence in the archives is as striking as the offers themselves. Some historians have traced family names and dialect patterns from Lower Saxony into the east, and modern genetic studies hint at shared ancestry between German and Transylvanian Saxon populations. But no DNA evidence yet ties Hamelin directly to any colony. The colonization theory fits the facts: organized departure, youthful age, the promise of new beginnings. But the final proof remains out of reach, waiting in lost documents and untested graves. The story of Hamelin's vanished children has drawn darker explanations, ones rooted not in migration, but in the shadow of death and ancient fear. Some have seen the piper not as a recruiter, but as a symbol, a personification of death itself, appearing in the years before the Black Death swept Europe. In this reading, the music is a summons, and the children's procession becomes a dance of death. Yet the evidence resists easy answers. None of the earliest accounts mention rats. Not a single line in the Lüneburg Manuscript or the church inscriptions ties the event to plague or vermin. The rat motif only creeps into the story centuries later as Europe's memory fills with images of disease and decay. By the 16th century, paintings and woodcuts show skeletons leading crowds in a grim parade, the Totentans or Dance of Death, mirroring the piper's spectral procession. But in 1284, there is no record of mass sickness in Hamelin, no sign of sudden pestilence to explain the loss. Other theories reach further into the unknown. Some suggest the children joined a festival or ritual in the hills near the Koppen, perhaps led by a charismatic figure, a ritual leader, a musician, a stranger whose presence marked the boundaries between the sacred and the forbidden. In this vision, the tragedy might have been a landslide, a sudden collapse that swallowed the young in earth and silence. Or perhaps violence came from outside: soldiers, bandits, disaster in the forest. Yet the archives hold no report of a landslide or massacre on that day. What remains is only the echo of catastrophe, filtered through centuries of folk memory. These explanations haunt the edge of the record, compelling, unsettling, but ultimately speculative, shadows cast by a story too strange and too incomplete to resolve. Hamelin's silent street forbids music, a living memory of vanished lives. When stories obscure real suffering, history risks repeating its darkest patterns. The unanswered fate of those 130 reminds us, every legend began as someone's loss. Some silences echo longer than any song. Share your thoughts below.